welcome to IoT Tuesday. Delighted to be here. I'm Andrew Parkin-White from the Mobile Ecosystem Forum. I'm their advisor on mobile IoT, and I would like to thank Cellusys for hosting this event this evening. So today we have a panel discussion on IoT security, and we'll be looking at the opportunities, the issues, and challenges, and I'm hoping for an interesting and thought-provoking discussion. So, a bit of context, we're seeing these very ambitious forecasts of billions of IoT devices out there, and fundamentally, are these predictions going to come true? If security is not there, there could be a major hurdle. We see organizations open to attack when they're running mission-critical applications, and without adequate investment in security and knowledge of security, we can see that the market might simply just not happen. So first of all, I would like to introduce the panel to you. I'd like them to say who they are, where they're from, and their interest in IoT and security.
Thank you very much. I'm Martin Garner. I'm COO of CCS Insight. We're an analyst firm. In addition to being COO, I lead the work we do in IoT, and my focus is more on the industrial side than the consumer side.
Good evening, Sylvia, Kechiche, GSMA Intelligence. I'm the principal analyst for IoT. So GSMA Intelligence is the research and consulting arm of GSMA. I guess everybody knows GSMA. We put the show every single year here in the FIRA, a little bit bigger than IoT Solution World Forum. So I look after IoT in general, and obviously security is one of the key issues that we look at, and we run surveys to find out what consumers think about security, what enterprises think about security. So yeah.
Hi, I'm Charles Bernard. I'm the CTO of Cellusys IoT, and I look after the solutions we can provide for connectivity, secured connectivity for enterprise customers.
Good afternoon, everyone. Fernando Llobregat from BICS. I am heading the sales team for IoT for enterprises. So we provide global connectivity for companies and especially devices that connect through the cellular networks.
And for those of you that don't know, the Mobile Ecosystem Forum, or MEF as we call it for short, we're a not-for-profit organization with over 100 members with our focus on market development and pushing through initiatives that help our members address their markets and create sustainable market growth. So I'm going to, first of all, do a little bit of scene setting, and I'm going to turn to Sylvia, first of all, because the GSMA has done some survey work and security came up as an issue.
Yeah. So we ran two surveys. We ran a consumer survey, and we found that amongst those people that, smart speakers, one of the key consumer IoT devices, and quite a lot of people are actually deploying. So across 20 countries that we surveyed so far, we plan to do about 30-something, 13% had smart speakers. And across those that didn't deploy smart speakers in their house, we asked, why is that? So majority said it's too expensive, but quite a few people had a security concern, so privacy and security concern. So on average, that was around 12%, and this is most pronounced in Germany, where 28% said we're not going to have smart speakers because we're concerned about the security and privacy. In Spain, that was 21%, in the US, 26%. And overwhelmingly, everybody said 30%, I see no benefits in that. So still, the benefits overweigh the security when you think about the concerns. So that's on the privacy and security. But then in general, we ask, how concerned are you with privacy and security of your personal data? Because with IoT, everything is about data. Consumer devices produce data, enterprise produce data. So on average, 28% of people were very concerned with data and privacy. And in Spain, that's 44%. So I guess people are more concerned about the data, and that's how it's being used. But that's the consumer. So us as individuals, what do we think about privacy and security? When it comes to enterprise, last year, at the end of the year, ran the IoT Enterprise Survey, and we surveyed over 2,000 enterprises in 14 countries across 8 verticals. And security came as one of the top 3 challenges when it comes to IoT deployments. So number 1 was cost of deployment, integration with existing infrastructure, and security and data privacy. So 47% said that's one of the key challenges. This percentage was even higher in China, when almost 60% said so. And you know, we did ask, so what do you do about that? And some enterprises said that obviously they already make sure that 63% said already make sure that the devices are secure, so they have security practices. But quite often they would outsource security assessments to third-party providers. And that goes back to the key challenge when it comes to security and IoT in general, the lack of internal skills. So if you don't have the skills in-house, you have to make sure that you either deploy guidelines. So GSMA has the IoT security guidelines that network operators and platforms can actually look at and make sure that the devices and what they do is secure. Or you have to go to specialists to ensure that what you're building is going to be secure. So it's a security by default. So end-to-end security is not only device, it's also software. It's so easy to surface of attack with IoT, that the key issue is that the surface of attack has increased massively.
Thank you, Sylvia. So, I mean, we're seeing that there's a rush to get products into the field, and security can often be an afterthought. So I'd like to open up the discussion to the panel more broadly and ask, what do you see are the principal challenges of IoT security? Is it the device, the network, the cloud, any combination of these? So, do I have a starter for 10 on this question?
So I think the answer is not really any of those, but is denial among suppliers who may not yet fully recognize the issue. And I had a really good example. I was at Embedded World in Nuremberg in February this year, and I met a man on a stand who made the signs that go on bus stops that tell you when the bus is coming. And it's a bit like, it's sort of twice the size of this, and it was a bit like a Kindle. And I asked him about security, and he said, oh, it's got really thick glass on the front. And I thought, yeah, okay, that's good, but it's not maybe the whole answer. And so I said, well, what about the data and access to all of that? And he said, well, the bus company do all that. We don't, it's not for us to do. And he was in complete denial that it was even his responsibility at all. And until we get past that, I think, we're still in the starting blocks, really. And I just suspect there's quite a lot of companies for whom that's true.
Yeah, I think one of the key issues is as well that security is seen as more of a hygiene factor. Everybody expects it to be there. Nobody really wants to pay for it. And there are examples of operators trying to enter the field. The example of companies we heard this morning about Microsoft actually deploying secure devices and making sure everything is end-to-end secure. But I think at the end of the day, it has to be secure end-to-end, because when you think about devices, low-power devices that don't have enough battery, it's really hard to do the over-the-air updates, right? So how can you avoid it? So that's one of the key issues with IoT becoming bigger and bigger and the surface of attack increasing. How do you ensure the end devices, as well as software, as well as the cloud, is all secure?
Well, I mean, I'm a bit pessimistic on that front, because I believe that no matter how hard we try, they're going to be compromised devices, because the challenge is that they live for 5 to 10 years. So you put a product now which is secured as of now, but in 10 years time, or not even 10 years, but 3 years time, is maybe not secured enough because there was a flaw you didn't know about at the time. So they're going to be there. So probably one of the ways to counteract that is through the analytics. It's a bit like the DDoS in the internet world. DDoS happened in the internet world. That's the way it is. So instead of trying to convene DDoS attacks, to secure all the devices that perform DDoS on internet, we have data scramblers that intercept the DDoS attack. And essentially, probably what's going to have to happen with IoT devices. We're going to have to detect them afterwards, probably deactivate them, or maybe not the best solution, but act on them or act on their traffic and find a way to mitigate the attacks that's going to be perpetrated by compromised device one way or another, because they will be there no matter how hard we try. They're already there anyway. So
Well, actually, everything was already said, but to answer specifically your question, I would say the device. For me, it's clear. The devices, there is still a long way to make sure that they are, let's say, delivered with the proper security, configure, what they say is zero-touch provisioning, that's following the guidelines of GSMA to make sure you have the PKI infrastructure. So for me, this is really the weak point. I'm not saying that software and the cloud is not important, but I said, okay, you still have already a lot of security work done there, and to be very, oversimplify, once the data is in the cloud, well, there are other ways to secure it. So for me, just to really get to the answer, your question, it's all about the device. This is where I see a lot of danger, in the sense that, as you mentioned, well, but somebody will take care, and actually nobody, or very few people, are taking care of securing what is happening inside. Tamper-proof, most of those devices, they have very limited power, limited also computing capabilities. So as you said, over-the-air update, forget it. So for me, it's really the device what is today the weakest link into that.
If I could just add one thing to that, and it's about the device. And it is that most IoT systems, as far as we can tell, go into service for 10 to 15 years. And even if they have, really good security today with AES 256 encryption and that kind of stuff, actually within that 10 to 15 years, we will have quantum computing as a commercial thing. And so actually what we need is not AES 256. What we need is the headroom to put quantum-proof algorithms in. And I only know of, I think, one company that's claiming they can do that in current security systems. But if not, then all the security we put in now will be approximately redundant in 8 to 10 years.
We kind of assume that 10 to 15 years is the average life cycle. We actually did the survey in 2 to 5. So this is being reduced. So that's quite important, because nobody will put something out there at the moment if they know it's not going to be secure in a couple of years' time. So I think there's a recognition that you need to make sure you build something secure and you don't put something out there.
Sure, but quantum computing changes the game completely.
Oh, feel free. So we talked a little bit about DDoS. What other main threats are enterprises facing from IoT security? What are the main threats that we see enterprises facing from IoT security?
I would say identity thefts. Today, one of the, 2 weeks, no, it was last week, in the GSMA, there were some discussions about IoT during the MWC in Los Angeles. And what they want to set up the protocols to make sure that the network, or even worse, or even better, the cloud can authentify the device, and the device can authentify the network. So they know each other, that they are talking to whom they should be talking. And that was quite interesting, because indeed, it's not like DDoS attack, but in fact, knowing you are sure you are talking to the right cloud and that you are getting the information from the right device, because that's also something linked to what you said. For me, the first thing when I hear about what do you need security to protect the data on the bus? But when you think about that, you can create, you can collapse a whole city if you get into that and put the wrong information. So sometimes we don't realize about also the importance of the data that is being transported, and how can this affect our company, a city, or an IT infrastructure, right?
This goes back to trust, right? Which device you can trust? What was the trust? How you establish the trust? But it's quite interesting, because we were talking before about private networks, and the reason why certain companies will have a private network is not only even data security, it's data isolation. You don't want your data to actually touch the network, because you don't want anybody to have access to that data. So there's a lot of things that are actually currently at play. So if your data is valuable enough, if somebody gets access of it, so it's the IoT data versus the enterprise data. There's a big discussion currently in the industry around what do we secure first? Is it the enterprise data, because different layer of security on that, versus the IoT IT data? So there is going to be, I think, lots of developments in this space just to ensure that both are important, because there's different layers when it comes to that.
Thank you. Thank you. So one of the issues that's come up is enterprises facing a serious security breach, and sometimes they just can't recover from those security breaches and go out of business. Do you see that there's sufficient security expertise out there, and who is responsible for it? Charles?
Yesterday I spoke with a colleague of mine. If you remember the Sony attack, so Sony is about IoT. So I did not verify the information, but what he told me is Sony paid less by the attack they suffered cost them less than the money they would have spent to secure the network from the attack itself. So I think that's one of the problem of companies also, that they don't necessarily see the value of protecting their network or the infrastructure, let's put it that way. And maybe because of monetary value, but I think there is a lack of expertise and there's a lack of education also. I mean, as long as there's a lack of education, they won't realize there's a lack probably of expertise. And as you said earlier, like if you want to assess, you can do assessment of your infrastructure for IoT security to see if it's properly secured, but a lot of people will use third parties, and I think that's one of the proof that there is a lack of security, of expertise, and a lack of education. So both have to, one will trigger the other one.
So how can we educate the market?
No, through those events, but we need, bring awareness to by all means. There's reporting the attacks that are out there, if enterprises are willing to do so. Education goes through awareness, that's usually a standpoint, but it's a constant effort from all the bodies, certification, not certification, but regulatory bodies probably would have to do it and bring it forward. GSMA, I think, is doing a good exercise.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things on that. So I know we're talking enterprise quite a bit, but on the consumer, I think there was a research that found out that top passwords are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and passwords. So there's education. Just make sure your password is secure and it's not something like anybody can guess. But also through the IoT security guidelines, I think 14 network operators undertook the assessment of the networks and so on, and they actually found out that when you have a gateway, if the password is admin, it's very easy to approach it, right? Another thing is connected cars, and in general, everything to do with IoT and IoT devices is if you can access the device, it's so much less secure because you can take it, pull it apart, and it's so much easier for the hacker. We've heard a couple of years ago, what was that? There was a microwave that got hacked into, and everything, lots of data got stolen. Fish tank. There was a fish tank, yes, in the casino, fish tank. Fish tank was not secured, and the whole entire casino, everything went down, right? So it's like, that's the whole thing. It's not a hygiene factor. You have to secure the smallest endpoint, and quite often people forget that that's what it can bring down the entire enterprise.
Yeah. And I think the education question is part of a much, much bigger question, because so many of the companies that are now making IoT-enabled machines, and so many of the companies that are buying them, come from a hardware or mechanical engineering background, and they're not trained in software or cloud or AI practices and what have you. And so they don't even know what questions to ask. They tend to design their product to a bill of materials, and security has to fit in there. They tend not to have a view of the sort of 10-year software life cycle that they need to support and so on. And there's a really enormous task across sectors of converting all of these people into being sort of software native guys. And the security question is an important part of that transition, but it's a big one. It really is.
So would you say security is an afterthought in trying to get devices out to the field?
Yeah, not an afterthought, but it's sort of designed as one of the latter parts of the budget within a bill of materials very often, and that's not quite where you should start.
Yeah. I mean, it depends also when you think about total cost of bringing a device to market. Sometimes people want to do something fast, right? When you're prototyping, you want to do it as fast as possible to bring it to market to achieve the return on investment and so on. And security is not considered as key. As soon as we realize that the cost of having something not being secure outweighs the returns, nothing is going to be done.
Yeah, I mean, security should be by design. That's one of the first principle. But it's indeed contradictory with the culture of the try fast, fail fast that everyone is looking after for any new development of the agile method, whatever you want to call it. So, but probably if the IoT security mechanisms are embedded hard enough in the devices or in the way things are by default out there, then there will be a safer path to development, and essentially like it should be so much by design that no matter what you get, you should have secured. But that's probably a utopia.
I mean, I agree with everything you said, but maybe just to put the discussion, to move it to another aspect, what could be, do you think that something like certification could be a solution for that? Yeah, and maybe I stole your question, but I didn't read it. Disclaimer, I didn't read your questions, but...
There is a lot of interest from regulators, government bodies at the moment that there should be a kind of standard or a mark for security, the same you get on washing machines for energy efficiency. And we also see that standards and frameworks are emerging for IoT security. The GSMA has a set of standards and frameworks. So do we need codes of conduct in the industry? And if we do need codes of conduct, who should be putting these together?
GSMA has been working on it for quite a while, simply because it's such an important issue. It's just bringing this knowledge that we have to market. And I think the certification, I think it depends whether somebody wants to pay for it as well. So that's the whole thing. And what we found out, we were looking at the security, and obviously across the entire value chain, is also an opportunity. It shouldn't be only a cost. You should be able to charge based on security. Like I think there's a major gap when it comes to what data people want to share, right? So like younger generations, they're quite happily giving their data away. The older one, not really. I think it's going to be the same with the older generation of devices, IoT devices. That was maybe an afterthought, but I think the new ones, if they are to be part of the solution, they will have to be secure, because there's got to be a new way of doing business. You have to be secure by design, by default, in order to be allowed to roll out services. I think that's where we're heading towards, because security is one of the key concerns when it comes to enterprise and enterprise data.
And I don't see the reality of having an end-to-end standard on the IoT ecosystem, because it's so large and vast. So probably certification on some of the elements, but we go back to the issue of the weakest link, which is the device, and there will be always devices that are certified. You can find a lot of devices that are certified, any European laws, but they're just not certified properly. So you will always have those weakest link nevertheless. I still believe that regulation should be there. I found interesting what happened, the law in California that they passed recently that devices, it's consumer devices shall not come with a default password. So that's already a step forward, at least on that front. And hopefully little by little it will get there. I'm coming from a roaming industry, and I've seen that regulation helped the roaming industry change dramatically. So regulation is the one way to move forward, not the only one. Certification will have to come along, but I guess that would be segmented into the different elements of the ecosystem rather than having an end-to-end standard, which I don't see possible.
I have to say that I don't believe at all in this certification. It's going to be so difficult to make sure, because certification, the moment you want to scale up, then you move to the self-certification. And then you open the Pandora box, because you will find yourself with devices who don't. So unless, and I come from the hardware, so I know how difficult and how easy it is to certify, to be certified. So unless, for example, the cloud with which you communicate or the application that you runs on top of your device is not hardly secure with certifies and PKIs, etc., you will still have surprises like the admin default password. More elaborated in 5 years' time. But honestly, it's gonna be a big fight, let's say, to get it right.
One thing, thank you. I think the Industrial Internet Consortium has done some quite interesting work with their security maturity model, which you can download for free and what have you. And basically it's a checklist of questions where if you work through it, you can see where you're good and where you're less good. And the view they've taken, which kind of reinforces what you said, is that in the industrial world, you can't just look at the device or just look at the network or just look at the cloud. Actually, the system security needs to be something that you take account of, because actually we're talking about quite sophisticated distributed computing systems. And if you certify the device, that's good. It really is good. But it doesn't tell you about the rest of what's going on, and that's all really important. So I think they've made quite a good step forward with the model they've put together. There's a lot of work gone into it. And they're starting to certify third parties to do assessment tests and things like that. So that is progress. I'm not sure we're there yet. But there are some good pieces of work going on in this area.
So turning our attention to mobile operators and their role in IoT security, is their role to be the trusted security provider, or is it a broader question for the entire ecosystem?
I think they have to obviously take responsibility for their own security, but they don't have a role. Most IoT doesn't use cellular, and so they can't be the trusted source of security because mostly they're not in use. Even where they are in use, they don't have full system accountability, usually, so they can't be the trusted source for the system. But they can do a good job on their own bit.
So obviously with the GSMA hat on, so operators want to be the trusted provider for security. That's how they see the role. And we have quite a few operators. So we have Telefonica with 11 paths that they've been doing security and then extending to IT security for quite a few years, and I have lots of examples and use cases how they do it. But obviously, with NB-IoT and LTM, the low power devices, that becomes even more important because you have so much less computing powers, longer battery life, so you have to ensure that that's going on. So the way operators see it is because they have experience of managing networks. They have experience of putting SIM cards in, that it is a secure element, right? SIM card is a secure element still. And then also there have been quite a few years ago, I think, a discussion on bootstrapping, so you can extend the security credentials, SIM security credentials onto other devices. But yes, as you said, when cellular, operators definitely have a role to play, but when it comes to when you bring in the Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, Zigbee, Z-Wave devices, exactly, that becomes much more difficult. So, if it's a gateway, who takes responsibility for that, right? So, yeah, exactly.
I mean, yes, I would agree with you, Martin, that operators can only secure if they're in the game of connectivity and if they have an interest into it. Because in the roaming scenario, you have two players. You have the visited operator and the home operator, and essentially, probably the home operator is the one who resold the IMSI. But the visited is not in the game and doesn't really care because he's not in the game. So, yes, they do have a responsibility, but that's only if they are interested in the IoT business. And for some of them, they're just provider of a pipe, and that's how they see themselves because they're not into the IoT space. So yes, at the end they do have, but it's still limited somewhat.
My opinion on that is I don't see the operators at all into that. I think that this is not. I mean, we are here to discuss. It's the task goes beyond what the place they have in the value chain. They can play a role. They can enable, have the tools. But very fast it will become an issue of the two sides of the value chain, if you want, the small device and the cloud, to make sure how end to end this is managed. And as you said, at the end the operators was just maybe one part in the middle, a key one, an important one. But I don't think we'll have a key role into that, because obviously there will be so many use cases, so many ways of, for example, deploying the devices, provisioning the devices, that again, we are talking about 5 years' time, so things will change. We will have quantum computing by that date. It will be too vast and too diverse, in my opinion, for the mobile operators to really to grab on that and have a kind of control on that. And I just wanted to for the previous questions, there is also somebody, we talk about regulation. 2 weeks ago, I was talking with somebody from the European Commission, and the guy, he just had come from we will all attending an eSIM conference, and he was like eyes like this when he saw the different use cases, which is somehow linked to security, proof of authenticity, and he said, well, how is the industry gonna manage that? Because there is also a lot of loopholes, we can say, in how they SIM the profile. And I told him, well, I don't know, but as a regulator, good luck. Because this was not the answer he was expecting, but it's also a question that, as you said, regulators, they can also have a role into that, but it's also it's going to be very difficult for them to find a place or what they can play, or how they can, in a certain way, have some leverage into this security, in the security aspects of the communications for the IoT, specifically for the IoT.
Okay, I have probably the penultimate question for you this evening, and it's one around IoT security and privacy, and they go hand in hand. What do you see as the difference between web and IoT regarding privacy? We knew the threats are there already. What makes privacy in IoT so challenging? And I'm going to hand over to Martin first.
Thank you. I think one way to think about there are two ways I'm going to say to think about it. One kind of makes me laugh, which is that Google, through its Google Cloud Platform, is now offering IoT services. And on the enterprise side, they say, your data is your data. We don't even see it, and what have you. And what that means is that for things, they are giving far better protection and privacy than they do to people with their advertising. And I think there's something fundamentally wrong there, which we all need to work out, especially Google. The other way, I think, is quite a nice way to frame the problem, and this came up in a discussion we had a year or so ago, was if a Spanish man is working for a Chinese company in Germany and rents a car from an American car company called Avis, and the car is a Toyota, so it's a Japanese car, and then he drives it to Switzerland, and it's all connected, as a connected car should be. It happens that Avis use Orange for their connections around Europe, so it's a French network. Where does the data go? Whose data is what? You know, some of the data is about the person. You know, the location data is very sensitive personal data. Some of it is pure car telemetry. How do you separate out the different types of data and what data goes where? Now, that's, I think, a neat way to think about the complexity of the problem. What I haven't done is give any answers there. I'm very conscious of that. But it's a sort of framework for thinking about it, because actually, that's probably the worst it gets. All IoT systems are a mini-cosm or microcosm of that. And if you can get it right for the difficult bit, then you're kind of onto a good start.
So I was at a conference once, and somebody said that probably 80-90% of all data was generated in the last 2 years, and probably around 1-2% of that data is actually analyzed. So there's lots of data because we have lots of devices, not only IoT devices, the consumer devices that generate data. And IoT is not only about connectivity. IoT is really about data and how you use data and how you analyze that data to create new value out of it. So in that sense, when you think about smart city, where in theory there should be data coming from the consumers, so smartphones, location data, etc., and from different connected street furniture, connected buses, connected whatever, smart meters, whatever you have connected, it's very difficult because you need to ingest all this data, and I don't think at the moment we even know how to begin to answer those questions. So at the moment we don't have a true smart city deployments because everything is in silos. So there is no real way that different data coming from different buckets or from different verticals can be analyzed, because there are different rules. Like you have GDPR in Europe, right? So there's different privacy. Some people want the data to be anonymized, some they don't. I mean, it's another thing. Like for machine learning and AI to develop, you need a lot of data to learn, right? But if the data is anonymized, is this valuable enough? And what type of data is useful data? So we have, I think, deeper and deeper we go into it, the more questions we have, and I don't think there's one answer. But security is making sure it's secure. Privacy is like protecting your own persona, whether or not it's enterprise data or whether it's consumer insights. Probably we're not answering the question.
Yeah, I think what Martin said summed it up. It's because the answer is to who those data belongs. And on the web, it was kind of easy to guess the data are mine, and I'm the one who's disclosing them on the web. But we were talking about smart speakers. The data, do they belong to me? Do they belong to Amazon? Do they belong to someone else? And for a car, it's the same. So the difference is probably that it's kind of blurry to who the data belongs, and with a lot of them, that creates complicated. That's what probably it's being siloed, as you said, and that has to be solved. This issue, I suspect, of finding out how we decide who owns the data. Are they for European user resident under GDPR or not? So that would be.
Well, I mean, my view on that, just try to answer your question, the difference in terms of privacy. I feel that with some new applications, the data that this is a old mechanical watch, so there is nothing, but the data that a smartwatch can collect from me is really intimate. I mean, so this is where sometimes, when you take some distance, I think the information from Alexa, it belongs to Amazon, because I guess the moment you switch it on, I don't know if this case, but potentially it doesn't even belong to you. But those devices, it's really getting into the intimate sphere. So I'm a little bit concerned about that at a personal level. Honestly, from a more, let's say, industrial perspective, this is really far from my core business today. But at a personal level, I'm really concerned. This is really getting too close to my inner circle. To know what I think, what I do, what I eat. So that's it. Yeah.
And then one final question. If you have one piece of advice for the attendees here to take away regarding IoT security, what would it be? We might as well go logical.
Okay, well, I would say think through all of the very worst things that can possibly happen, absolutely the worst things, including quantum computing and all the data privacy stuff. So I would say plan for the worst and hope for the best.
I would say that there are some tools in place. As I mentioned, the Industrial IoT Consortium, GSMA put together IoT security guidelines. So, like educating yourself on what can potentially happen and just trying to prevent some of the worst case scenarios.
I would say education. That's what it is about. And the problem also sometimes on security is that we're only aware when we hear about an incident, but remember that not everyone is releasing the information that they've been hacked. So what we see, what we hear in the news is probably just the tip of the iceberg.
Well, I would say use an Ethernet cable, but honestly, this will not sort out all your problems. I'm really focusing, I think, at this step of the IoT, it's really about the device. Make it tamper-proof. Be careful with identity. For me, this is a key issue. So really think about the device and what you are putting inside and what the device is transmitting. Then, of course, I mean, that depends a lot on the applications, but I would say that. This is that's what I say. I think today, device makers, they need to find a trade-off in terms of that, and it comes to the point of euro, dollar, whatever you want. I mean, it's a question of money, in my humble opinion. Then from things I have heard with other technologies, because I mean I'm very narrow-minded talking about cellular. But for example, one of the strong points of those other LP1 technologies like LoRa and Sigfox is that the device is totally dumb. So okay, you can maybe access to it, but it's so stupid that it's pointless to access to it because it doesn't even have an IP stack. So forget about any kind of DDoS attack, but this is very specific to those technologies. And here the idea is to have a wider scope. So I think devices will need to be more intelligent, but you will have to get a trade-off in terms of the security you put inside. I mean, maybe there is somebody expert in the room, but I guess that to provision the deployment of few million devices with public key infrastructure and all this, wow. I mean, it's a nice challenge.
So the GSMA is working on that. There's guidelines of the SIM as a root of trust. Yeah. So essentially, it's to embed TLS security in the SIM cards, and so you have yes. So you have TLS, IDMIA, and GND, and all big ones on the SIM cards. Manufacturers that are there and trying to come up with a solution where essentially you have TLS encryption directly in the SIM cards. But even though they have challenges because the SIM card is secured, but the SIM card yet does not authenticate the device. So you still have to link. If you remove the security from the device, you put it in the SIM card, then you need to authenticate the device back. So you create another problem. But there's working in progress. So I invite you to look at the document if you're interested.
There is LTM and BIT security as well, discussing how LTM and BIT is part of the cellular family, therefore is secure, but not designed, but has secure element.
Question for you. What role do you see the standards play in the security space? Which ones
You are the standards. GSMA.
Nobody is from the standard. Nobody is from the standard.
Nobody is from the standard.
I mean, so I don't believe in standard end to end. It's my view. I don't think it's technically feasible. The ecosystem is way too complex. I guess there are frameworks, though I think there's so many security guidelines frameworks that it becomes confusing. Honestly, and Fernando was saying that you don't believe in certification. You believe it's complex. I think my view is regulation, little by little, will help, and with framework and certification.
Yeah, so I have a little note in here. So ETSI has their own frameworks, and GSMA has ANISA. So there's lots of bodies that work on standardization, not per se, but just more around frameworks. Because I think the ecosystem is so fragmented when you think about it, that it's really hard to say that this is the standard, because you will have a different standards when it comes to Zigbee. And even within Zigbee, you have so many players that it's hard for Zigbee Alliance to say these are the standards you should adhere by. The same, you have all the short-range technologies, which are the majority of connected devices at the moment. It's really hard to ensure that all are applying by different set of standards. So I think it's at the moment it's very much best effort, and depends on the provider, and depends very much who's leading that. But there are some efforts like ARM, is heavily focused on security and the making sure the devices, even the microcontrollers they put out there, they're secure. So I think, I'm not sure, I'm coming back to your standards regulation thing. I think it's very much depends, especially because IoT is so fragmented and there are so many different microcosms within IoT related to different verticals. Automotive has different sets of rules and regulations. Retail has different one. Manufacturing has different one. Manufacturing wants everything to be offline. They don't really want much to go online. So IoT as a whole is very difficult to say it's going to be the same rules and standards across the entirety. No? Okay.
Thank you. Any more questions or no? I'd like to thank the panel for a very interesting discussion, and I'm certainly learning a lot and taking away what we need to do to move the ecosystem forward. So I'd like to say thank you to Fernando, to Charles, to Sylvia, and to Martin. And thank you all for being here. And now you can eat, drink, and be merry.